Alrighty, a 3, 2, 1. Welcome everybody to this week's edition of our ShawLocal.com Bears Insider podcast. I am Hub Arkush, and my co-hosts again this week are our ShawLocal.com Bears Insider beat reporter Sean Hammond, and of course our Shaw Media Group sports editor Kyle Nabors. And guys, let's get it out of the way quick. It was ugly again last week. It's now 17 out of 20 that the Bears have dropped to the Green Bay Packers. And, I think there were two things that stuck out about the game. One is that Bears are in it. Again, Bears are clearly, they can play with the Packers. They're as good, if not better, at every position but one. And that was not the complete story of the game last week, but certainly a big part of it. And then, of course, number two, Aaron Rodgers had to put a little exclamation point on it. And so I just start there real quick, guys, and then we probably ought to move on to going forward. I actually had a moment. It's the first time in decades of being on the radio that I've ever had somebody hit the dump button on me because I used a word that I wasn't supposed to use, and it was funny because I thought about it before I said it. I was thinking, what's the most uncomplimentary thing I can say without getting dumped or being inappropriate, and so I just went for a female hygiene product, and I've heard it on the air 1,000 times, but apparently the station I work at doesn't allow it. It doesn't change the fact that that's pretty much what Aaron Rodgers is, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, and then getting to the end zone and acting like he'd never been there before. It's not what you expect from a lockdown first ballot Hall of Famer. But that's Aaron Rodgers. And so I'll just get my comment out of the way quickly. Not going to talk about it anymore because he was right. He does own the Bears. You can't argue about 17 of the last 20. But my God, man, act like you have some class, some way, somehow, or that you're not one of the world's worst female hygiene products who ever lived. So, that's about all I have to say about it.
I mean, there's not really any disputing that Aaron Rodgers is a bit of a jerk. At the same time, I chuckled. Just because if the entire crowd is gonna give you the bird, you might as well goad them back a little bit. In my estimation, I was okay with it.
Did you see the pictures online, Kyle, of 5, 10 fans doing that all at the same time? Yeah. I'll say this. I agree with sort of what you guys are saying, but part of me does enjoy when people show their true emotions, and I think we saw that a little bit with Rodgers this summer with that press conference when he came back to the team, and he said what was on his mind, and I'll give him props for saying what was on his mind in that moment. Did he go about it the right way? I don't know. Maybe you could argue not, but I like it from that aspect, from that angle, I guess.
Yeah, guys, I guess my approach to it, though, is it comes on the heels of everything else that's gone on in the last year. And he doesn't just do it with people goading him. He tortures innocent victims, including his own organization, his own teammates, his own fan base. And so I come from a bad place to start. That said, I think it is always important to note that he is one of the, 4 or 5 greatest. Well, I don't want to get into greatest players because then we could do 7 podcasts on it. Maybe we will, but just not today. But he certainly is one of the 4 or 5 greatest quarterbacks of all time. And there's no argument about that. And you got to separate, your football from everything else. But it is a different relationship that these guys have with fan bases, whether it's their fans or others. And it's just so disappointing to me that a guy who is that good could be so much more, and forget Bears fans, do what you want there, but even just in general. And so it's unfortunate to me because he's kind of the face of the league right now, or at least one of the 3 or 4 faces of the league. And it's not the face that I'd like to see on the sport that I love. But again, no right or wrong here. I think if you're fine with it, then I'm good because I don't want anybody to be bothered when they don't have to be. And if you're in the middle, that's probably reasonable too. And so let's just get real quickly to what happened in the game. People walk away saying, "Oh, Bears Packers got beat again." It was a 3-point game, guys. At the end, in the middle of the fourth quarter, whatever the timing was when they scored that last touchdown, the Packers are a 4-minute drive away from putting it away. So of course they go on a 6 or 7-minute drive and put it away. And then the Bears have no answers because they're just not good enough on offense right now. but it's the frustration with this football team because even if it's not the Packers, it's how close they are. I mean, you look at their records. They've got 2 of the 3 wins over 4-2, football teams, 4-2 teams fighting for first place. Their losses are their quality losses. You lose to the 5-1 Rams, you lose to the 5-1 Packers. I mean, nobody is going to say that means you're a bad football team. So that's what makes this so frustrating. And they had a chance last week because if it had come over the Packers, that breakthrough quality win, I think changes the dynamic of the season. And instead, it pretty much solidifies that they are where they are, going nowhere, and probably with no good answers, even though, there is 11 weeks left, and we certainly hope to enjoy it.
Sean, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I think if you had asked Bears fans before the game, okay, if you're down 3 in the fourth quarter and you got your defense on the field, I think they would take that. That's a situation that Bears fans would like, and it just didn't work out. I mean, Aaron Rodgers just did what he does against a lot of good defenses, and he took over that fourth quarter drive, and like you said, Hub drove down 6, whatever. I don't remember how long that drive was, but he ate up a lot of clock, and at that point when they scored, it essentially felt like the game was over. And you're right, though, they were in this game, and their offense stalled out for a lot of that middle part of the game, and if they could have gotten something going, there's plenty of reason to believe that they could play with that team.
That's
real quick, if I can just jump in to Kyle's point right there, is that not only in the game, they dominated the first period. Sean and I are sitting next to each other in the press box at the end of the first period. I'm thinking, wow, they're finally going to beat them. That's how much they dominated them in the first period. It took 2 possessions on each side of the ball. Packers coaching staff, led by Matt LaFleur, Joe Barry on the defensive side, they made adjustments. They had answers for what the Bears were doing. They made those adjustments, and the Bears coaching staff had no answers for the adjustments the Packers made, not only not in game, but in the locker room at halftime. From that point, it was a different football game. And so that is kind of the last piece that gets us to where we're at right now with this Bears team. So I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just think that's an important point to get to.
Hey, Hub, one quick thing. I think your headphones might be dragging on your shirt because every once in a while I think that's hitting like the collar.
Okay.
I don't know if you can avoid that.
For those of you who are not watching us live on StreamYard, I got to avoid big collars. And I
do that too. I was concerned about wearing this as well because it rubbed on it, and then you can hear it, and you don't think about it, but I can hear it doing it.
The funny thing about that, Kyle, is not only do I know you're right, but I usually think about these things before we do these broadcasts. But I've been so just worked up and aggravated all week long that I was anxious to jump in. But yes, I'll avoid that. Sorry to our audience. But anyway, go ahead, Kyle. Give us the jumping off point to move on.
No, so this is what's frustrating when watching the Bears is because that Cleveland game that we saw earlier in the season, that's probably not going to happen again this year. This team is too good. The defense in particular, it's too good. They're going to be in every game pretty much. And it's frustrating because they're, like I said, the defense is good enough to keep them in games. The offense isn't good enough to win them a lot of games against quality opponents. So, and, just for instance, I don't bet, I don't gamble when it comes to like lines, over, under, stuff like that. But when I saw, I got a couple friends that I'm in a text chain with, and they usually are texting back and forth. And the Bears opened as a 14-point underdog against Tampa. And listen, the Bears aren't better than Tampa, but they're not 14 points worse than Tampa just because the Bears routinely aren't going to give up 30 points. You know what I mean? Like they're going to be in that range of 20 to 24 points allowed most of the time. And they're only going to be able to score 16, 17, maybe 20 most weeks. That's kind of what's frustrating, but it's also what's going to probably keep them in the playoff conversation all the way through December.
Yeah, well, it could. The schedule, as we have talked about, guys, you never get too excited about it in the summer because it changes by week 5, week 6, and week 7. And it's still a very difficult schedule, but suddenly there's a stretch or two coming that don't look as brutal as they did a while ago. I mean, they've proven they can play with the Pittsburghs and the New Orleans of the world. We'll see if they do or not. But all these teams that scared everybody coming into the season, I just picked those two off the top of my head, not necessarily Bears opponents, but although they get Pittsburgh in a week or two, I think.
It's not even about the opponents at this point. It's with the expanded playoff spot and how mediocre the NFL is. I mean, you look at the NFC, San Francisco struggling, Seattle's without Russ Wilson for a long time. The NFC East, outside of Dallas, stinks. I mean, the Saints are down. The Panthers had a nice start, but are regressing. Like the Bears are going to be in that conversation as, you know, an 8-win team or a 9-win team probably in late December. It doesn't mean the Bears are good. That's just kind of the way the NFL is right now, right?
Well, yeah, and it would be very Bears-like if that's exactly what happened, because now you're back to an 8 or 9 win playoff team that probably isn't enough to save the jobs of Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace, but probably would, you know, and so then we'd be blessed with another season kind of like this one, which I don't think anybody. One other point, and then I know, Kyle, we're going to let our buddy Hairless Yoda kick us off this week, because we really like getting your questions, guys, and let you drive the conversation and tell us what you'd like to talk about or analyze. But you mentioned that Cleveland game, and that one's been kind of nagging at me for the last 10 days or so, because there's something we've learned in these last 2 games, which is for all the crap that was heaped on Matt Nagy and the coaching staff and the offensive line, and what a complete disaster that Cleveland game was. The Bears, that game was about Justin Fields not being ready for it, not blaming Justin Fields, not saying he's bad, not saying he's not going to be great. But it was a perfect example of where Matt Nagy had a choice to make. He didn't have to go to Justin Fields. That's why Nick Foles is here. And all I'm saying is they probably still lose the game, because I think Cleveland probably is a better football team than them. But it also would have been a lot more competitive if they'd have had Nick Foles at quarterback, only because of the veteran experience and not all the mistakes that Justin Fields made in that game. So you look at some of these things that skew it a little bit in one direction or the other, and you got to wade through those and add some analysis to them. Sean, I just, you know, again, I remember sitting in the press box of that one, watching it, and you know, following Twitter and seeing all the Bears fans going nuts, and just thinking to myself, guys, when you hold the ball for 5.5 seconds in the pocket, you're going to get sacked. Now, he didn't hold it that long on everyone, but there was, and I'm not as good as Sean is with the next gen stats and PFF and keeping up with all this stuff. But I do know that there was a stat that came out from that game that in 7 of those 9 sacks, Fields held the ball 4.5 seconds or longer. You can't do that in the NFL. I mean, you go 1-1000, 2-1000, 3-1000, and if that ball's not out on 3-1000, there's a better than 50-50 chance you're going to get sacked, or the play is going to break down. And so that particular ugliness was more about not that the kid isn't good, but the fact that he wasn't ready. And so as we evaluate this team, it's more what Kyle just said, I think, Sean, in that they are in the middle of the pack, and maybe they're one of the better teams in the middle of the pack because of that defense. But I think that we're all tired of them being that.
Yeah, Next Gen Stats has a time to throw metric, and I believe, I'm just going off the top of my head here, I was looking at this week, I think Justin Fields is a little bit below average as far as all the starters in the league. You know, he's ahead of some of his rookie peers. Zach Wilson and Trey Lance are slower behind him getting the ball out. But the thing about that, though, is it doesn't take into account plays when the quarterback was sacked, which I think would really, with 18 sacks, that would dramatically lower Justin Fields' ranking on that list.
Yeah, you know, Kyle, I'm guessing a lot of our listeners know, because they're obviously serious fans, that Justin Fields has been sacked more than any starting quarterback in the league. The Bears it's interesting, the Bears are first in the league in quarterback sack percentage on defense, and they're last in the league on quarterback sack percentage on offense. And so that's kind of the story of this football team right now. And I will say, because again, I know how this is going to play, because people think I'm somehow anti-Justin Fields, and I absolutely am not. You know, I think the kid I think he's a great prospect and has shown some signs that he's going to be a great quarterback. It just takes time, and people don't realize that. And the difference is that nobody expected the Jaguars or the Jets, or necessarily even the Patriots. And Mac Jones is the best rookie quarterback right now. I don't know that he's going to be the 3rd or 4th best in this class, but we knew he was the most ready to play. And the Trey Lance numbers are misleading, because I think he's only attempted about 20 passes. So, but that's where we're at, and it's obviously not changing. And so it leads us to a lot of interesting dialogue about this football team.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to, if you're a fan and you want Justin Fields to play, you just have to separate the fact that he probably at this stage doesn't give them the absolute best chance to win. I don't know how much of a downgrade his current play is from Andy Dalton or Nick Foles, but certainly it's taking Justin Fields a bit of time, and that shouldn't be surprising, and it shouldn't alarm anyone. You're going to see, and I think we have seen him get better pretty much week to week. But it's going to take some time. It's going to probably take 8, 10 weeks, 10 games until you really see significant strides made. I would venture to guess.
Yeah, I think it's as simple. And again, fans can do whatever they want. That's the fun of being fans. But what I would suggest is stop blaming everything about the way Justin Fields is playing on Matt Nagy and Bill Lazor and John DeFilippo and the offensive line. This is what you get with rookie quarterbacks, and it's part of the issue of trying to compete and improve your football team. So with that, I guess I got to thank Hairless Yoda. I didn't realize he was the one who caught the mic on the zipper problem. So thank you for that, Yoda. And Kyle, I believe he's got a question to get us kicked off with our visitors here.
Yeah, this is kind of what we're talking about. But what weakness is hindering the offense most? QB inexperience, poor passing block, wide receiver separation, or the offensive scheme in general? It's all of the above. Outside of the pass blocking, I think has actually been pretty decent. It's gotten better. I don't think that's the issue. A lot of the sacks have been because of Justin Fields just holding the ball too long. I do think they have an issue at wide receiver. They are just not good enough at the position. I'm sure we'll be talking about that more. I already see several questions in here asking about different wide receivers. And the offensive scheme, I mean, it's been, it's definitely been dialed back, right, with Justin Fields. And that comes down to his inexperience. And I do think they probably needed to dial it back a little bit because of the offensive line limitations, right?
Yeah, I mean, Sean, I guess I answered the question before it was asked. I mean, the question is what's hindering it the most? It absolutely is Justin Fields' inexperience. I mean, that in my mind is 2 or 3 times as much of a hindrance as any of the other things that Yoda is asking about. But that's not to say that all the other things aren't problems. I'm going to, be the devil's advocate here. There's nothing wrong with the offensive scheme. It works fine for the Kansas City Chiefs. And I'm sure Bears fans would enjoy back-to-back Super Bowls in a ring. You just got to have the guys who can play it. And this is Matt Nagy's version of Andy Reid's scheme. So maybe it's not quite as good as Reid's, but everybody wants to go there as an automatic, and it's not, and the offensive line isn't good enough. It's probably, reached average at this point because a lot of teams with offensive line problems, but some of those teams have much better offenses. And I think, Sean, I first wrote about this last summer, as exciting as all the speed was, Marquise Goodwin and Demir Byrd, who were brought here to change the wide receiver room, aren't great NFL receivers. They're fast guys who've each had, Goodwin had one exceptional year in 2017, 960 some yards on 50 some catches, average 19.7, and can be, but hasn't been the other 6 years in his career, 5 in all fairness, because he opted out for 1. Demir Byrd has never had more than a number 3 or number 4 receiver type year. And maybe that's all you're asking him to be. But after being ignored for 5 or 6 weeks, he drops a swing pass Sunday, his 4th or 5th target of the year. So no, they're not good enough at wide receiver. And that's why Darnell Mooney and Allen Robinson don't have much bigger numbers, because they are a legit 2 and a 1. And yet, you can't play with just 2 wide receivers.
Yeah, you certainly can't play, the Kansas City Chiefs offense with only two receivers out there. And outside of Mooney and Robinson, nobody on this team has more than 20 catches at this point. And, Cole Kmet's coming in third there with 14 receptions. And we talked about the importance of finding that third receiver all off season long, and they just haven't done that. I mean, they've brought some guys in who they hoped could be that, but nobody has really stepped up into that role.
Kyle, I know we want to get to a lot more questions, but just finishing up on this one, we get to talk to the position coaches every other week or twice a month. And we had them this past Monday, and I ended up in kind of a one-on-one, which is extremely rare in this COVID world. But you get to go one-on-one with anybody just because of the way the whole thing is set up. But I was the only guy with Clancy Barone for about 5-6 minutes, and we got to talk. And I started with, what's up with Jimmy Graham? And His initial answer was, coach speak, trying not to answer the question. And I said, okay, Clancy, I understand that. I've been covering the game for a long time, but what's up with Jimmy Graham? And he said, listen, Jimmy is not the only guy here who's not getting the ball thrown to him. And he didn't say it, you got to be careful because I don't want to get these guys in trouble. It wasn't facetious. It wasn't negative. It wasn't pointing fingers. It was stating the obvious, that it's not just Jimmy Graham, that Goodwin and Bird don't have nearly enough targets for your number 3 and number 4 receivers, that most teams have a 5th guy that they throw out there. And the Bears don't really, they have them, but they haven't used them. And so here's the tight end coach telling me that honestly, there's only 2 possible answers. Part of it is that one of the reasons that the offensive line has gotten better, the run blocking, the protection, is because they are using extra people so much, and when Alex Bars is on the field as a 6th offensive lineman, one of those tight ends isn't, and they can't be targeted. And when they're in their 2 and 3 tight ends, they've gotten out of the 3 tight end because JP Holtz hasn't been able to play the last couple of weeks. Jesse James had been missing, and then Jesse James came back last week, but didn't really, didn't play or didn't show up. Isn't quite. JP Holtz is the best inline blocker of their 4 tight ends, although they've all, gotten pretty good. And Jesper Horsted, of course, the 5th tight end. But they're not using weapons that they need to give Justin Fields more targets because they've chosen to do more to protect him. So now you do get into a scheme question of, are you hurting him by doing more to protect him? By not giving him enough targets out there and treating him with kid gloves. I don't have a good answer to that question, but it's a fair question.
It's a catch-22. I mean, you don't really know which way is the best to go, but it's interesting because the Bears are trying to win now. They think that they can win now. They can't do what the Jets or the Jaguars are doing with their rookie quarterbacks and just go with the offense that they want to run and wing it with the rookie quarterback because they think they can win now.
Well, and Kyle, I'll tell you what bothers me so much about it is that until the Packers game, Justin Fields, it's not that he hadn't been good. He'd been bad with his legs, which was supposed to be one of his, special assets. Now, he did have a nicer game running with the football Sunday, but even in that game, twice, he got stuck out of the pocket, one-on-one with Kenny Clark and lost both times. Kenny Clark got a couple sacks. That can't happen with a quarterback who runs 4.4 and a 320-pound nose tackle. Now, I think it's just inexperience. I think it's that he's not doing it enough, and it's because he's in these situations where there's so much traffic in the pocket, and teams can rush 4 or 5 guys because you're only using 2-3 receivers, and so it's not playing the scheme the way it was meant to be played. That I think they may think it's helping to develop him as a game manager and a passer, but I don't think it's helping him, as a complete quarterback.
Well, it's both thing, or it's indecision, whether it's in the passing game or deciding to run or to pull the ball down and run. It's what you expect out of a rookie quarterback. It is hurting him. It's hurting the Bears offense. There's a reason he's taking sacks. It's a reason he's losing yards on that. It's indecision. And I don't know how long that's going to take. It's just something that you're going to have to live with. If you want him on the field right now, you got to live with that.
What's funny about it, guys? It's almost like he's made it a 2-part decision. In that first, he doesn't leave the pocket as soon as he should sometimes. But then also, once he leaves the pocket and he's just got 1 or 2 guys to beat, he kind of stops again and just tries to decide, should I beat these guys or should I keep looking downfield? And I think that, when you leave the pocket after 2 or 3 seconds as an experienced quarterback, you can keep your eyes downfield, but you're thinking go, okay? He's thinking, keep my eyes downfield and find a receiver. He's had this drilled into him so much, I think, that I just think that they're doing some right things, some good things in developing a young quarterback, but I think they're doing some things that are slowing him down a little bit.
The problem too, when you say keeping his eyes downfield, when he keeps his eyes downfield, then he still doesn't throw the ball. It's like he still has that indecision. Yeah, it's a 2-part thing, and I'm surprised someone already hasn't said that we're being too harsh on him. I fully support Justin Fields playing. I think he should be playing. I think they made the right decision. But that doesn't mean that there aren't issues right now with Justin Fields. Like I said, I think he's going to be a star at some point, but it is taking time, and it's going to continue to take time. This is not something that's going to be fixed going into Tampa Bay this weekend. And it probably, this sets up probably even better spot than last weekend for Justin Fields, because the Tampa Bay defense is a real pass funnel. Like, this is a game where Justin Fields should be able to throw for 250 yards, particularly because he's going to need to, probably because they should be trailing most of it.
Yeah, he should. Will they let him? Is I guess the question. And yeah, if you're down, that's going to happen. We saw it last week. He threw more last week than he had all season. And to go back to your point a little bit, Kyle, that's why you play the rookie quarterback, because you're going to get these. He's going to learn if he can outrun Kenny Clark or how he can do that, and you just need to get him the reps. And you're sacrificing a little bit right now in doing that. You're maybe not giving yourself the absolute best chance to win, but this is important for the future of the team and for Justin Fields' future.
Well, here's a quick thought. Let's say they go 9-8 and make the playoffs as that last team, or 8-9, which is a possibility, and make the playoffs. If Justin Fields progresses like we expect him to progress for the rest of the season, does that give him a better chance to actually win a couple games in the playoffs? If Justin Fields is where he should be by the end of this, does that give him a better chance to win than Andy Dalton would have?
Well, that was two different questions. It definitely gives them a better chance to win with Justin Fields at quarterback if he is progressing, and especially if he wins a couple tough games late to get him there. Does it give him a better chance of Andy Dalton than Andy Dalton? I'm not sure that's a binary choice. I know we want to make it that way. And I've tried to be very careful here, because I had a bunch of people jumping on me, Twitter, whatever. Oh, you were right. Dalton gives them a much better chance to win. They win that game with Dalton. And no, not necessarily. No. I absolutely believe that right now, the way Fields is playing, Andy Dalton does give them a better chance to win because of all the things that we're talking about. But that doesn't mean that they would have beat the Packers with Andy Dalton, because everything changes then. The whole flow of the game changes. You don't know what's going to happen there. And Andy Dalton is not Aaron Rodgers. I mean, he's not an elite NFL quarterback. He's a quality game manager starter, and normally with a defense like the Bears have and a running game like the Bears have, a lot of teams can do good things with that. That's what Dalton did his first 5 years at Cincinnati. But then he got to the playoffs 5 times. The first 4 couldn't win. They didn't win the 5th time either, but he was out that game with a broken thumb. So, guys, that ship has sailed. I think that they were absolutely wrong to make the move when they did. I think Dalton deserved at least a chance when he was healthy again, and Fields clearly wasn't ready. Don't know why the plan suddenly got dumped in the garbage can. Don't know what Fields did to convince him it was time to make that change. But once you do it, you go back, now you're just going to make the mess worse.
Sorry, I got distracted. We did a Friday Night Drive live stream last night. I had a fly in here that was annoying my dog the entire time, and now it's attacking me as we're doing the live stream. So I'm like, here.
Oh, Kyle's under attack.
I thought you were going, Hub, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
No, getting hit in the head by a fly. Sean, go ahead. I completely lost.
Well, I'll add this. We're talking. I know it's really early to be talking this stuff, but when you look at the NFC right now, there's a very real possibility that this could be the situation that's coming down the pipe here with the Bears. I don't know who they're 8th in the NFC right now, and you look at the teams behind them, and you don't really know who is going to step up and take that spot. So I think they're going to be in this mix the whole season, and it's going to come down to how Justin Fields progresses throughout this season, and is he going to be better in January than he is right now? And sure, that'll absolutely give him a chance in a playoff game.
Well, let me just add one other thing, guys. Here, there is recent precedent for this that should warn everybody about, if you're even thinking that there is a choice here. It's what the Miami Dolphins did last year. They gave Tua the job. I thought Tua was playing pretty well, but they decided it was too soon. They went back to Ryan Fitzpatrick. Then Fitzmagic got hurt. They went back to Tua. Now they did finish 10-6, but now halfway into Tua's second year, the hottest rumors in the league is that they're ready to give up on him. And so you do not want to create that kind of atmosphere, that kind of situation around Justin Fields. So Debating is just for the sake of the debate is fun sometimes. So we can talk about, whether they should or shouldn't have done what they did, given Fields the job too soon. But it really doesn't matter because I just think it would be a huge mistake to take it away from him now.
Yeah, the Tua situation is interesting. Definitely some red flags starting to show up there with him. It does seem like that's pretty quick to pull the plug on him, though. I don't think you're going to see that with Justin Fields. But Sean, I mean, you're right. That's what I was kind of getting at earlier. Actually, Hub and I were talking on the phone for a little bit yesterday, and I said I think it's the last game of the season they play Minnesota, and there's a very realistic chance that's a game where it's winner gets in, loser goes home.
Oh yeah, totally. Go ahead, or Hub.
No, I just, I will add this though, guys. I think we're ignoring, we're not ignoring it, but I have to add it to the conversation. A lot of games in these last 11 that I think they can win at 100%, they can't win at 90 or 95%. And I think a lot of this conversation about them playing for the playoffs the last week or two of the season depends on Khalil Mack, Akeem Hicks, Robert Quinn, all in their 30s, getting back to complete health and playing at the level that we know they can play at. I believe Mack will because he's Khalil Mack. Robert Quinn, if it's just the COVID situation, then there's nothing to worry about there. I don't know if we're ever going to see Akeem Hicks dominate again, the way we got used to. Man at his size dealing with a groin injury and all the injuries he's had the last couple of years. I don't know that we can be comfortable that either or both Danny Trevathan and Alec Ogletree flying around the way they are in their 30s can continue to play the way they are. Tayshaun Gibson, who I love, that was a pretty bad whiff in the backfield last Sunday in the fourth quarter that in part led, to those scores that put the game away. If this defense can get and stay healthy, then I think absolutely what we're talking about probably will happen. But, because Justin Fields is going to continue to improve. He's too good an athlete and too good a football player and too good a kid not to. How far he's going to come, how quickly is the question. But they got to get healthier than they are now to be talking about a team that can still play with some of these other better than average teams, the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season.
Yeah, and look, there's a lot of football to be played. And go ahead, Kyle. What were you going to say?
No, I was yeah, definitely. I mean, they don't have, they're not good enough offensively. They don't have a large window, on defense where they have to stay healthy and they can't have bad games. Like they have to be able to hold teams, like I said earlier, to essentially that 20 to 24 point range most weeks.
Well, and then they got to get to the point where they can score 25 points a week. And I know that's what you're saying, but just to amplify that a little bit more, it isn't going to matter. I mean, nobody wants to hear this, but the 323 yards that they held Rodgers and the Packers to last Sunday was the worst the Packers have had, except for the debacle in the opener against the Saints. The 24 points was the least the Packers have scored in any of their 5 wins. And so theoretically, if you're a good football team, you win, you beat them, Bears couldn't do it. San Francisco 49ers, who are having almost as many problems on offense as the Bears, play the Packers. Yeah, they got beat, but they at least scored 28 points, and so, these are the teams, these comps are fairly important. When you look at who the Bears are, and this drives me crazy, and Kyle and I were talking about a couple future columns, immediate future, so I don't want to go too deeply into them right now. But one of the lack of national respect that the Bears get is kind of stunning to me. I not because they're a good team, just because they're not as bad as people want to make them out to be. I'm reasonably sure that the Bucs have not been a double-digit favorite yet this year, and they are the best team in the league. So why would they suddenly open at 14 over the Bears? Because the perception out there is, they're one of the worst teams in the league. No, they're obviously not. They're just not one of the really good teams in the league.
Yeah, they are not the Detroit Lions. They are not the New York Jets. They are not the Jacksonville Jaguars. Who are some other bums that I'm thinking? They are not the Houston Texans. They are firmly entrenched in this blob of mediocre, which is frustrating. Really, if you're a Bears fan, that's frustrating. You almost would rather they just either they take off and they're good, obviously would be great, or they just suck enough to where you can feel like you can clean house and start over. But when you're stuck in the middle here, it's frustrating to watch, and it's definitely frustrating because Bears fans justifiably feel like that's not going to lead to any changes because, well, I mean, we saw last year, it doesn't lead to many changes. But going to the San Francisco comment, the difference there, obviously they're both playing rookie quarterbacks that are making mistakes and holding the ball too long. But I mean, the Niners have more talent on offense. You look at the skill positions. You got Brandon Ayuk out there. I love Deebo Samuel. George Kittle, when he's healthy, the offensive line is in better shape. I mean, that's a big thing there. And I think this is a good time. I'm going to transition over here to a question from CJ Williams, where he had asked, with the lack of pass catchers on the team, will Perriman get off the practice squad?
Well, considering it's his 7th team in 5 or 6 years, just being a former number 1 pick doesn't mean you're not Kevin White, and I think Kevin White gets a bum rap because, when you start your career with 3 season-ending injuries early, it's too high a hill to climb. So let's not be too hard on Kevin White. But the point is, number 7 overall pick, is hanging around practice squads in his 5th year in the league. Perriman, he's never been the player that we thought that he was Central Florida. You didn't know, if you were comparing apples and apples when you looked at some of the other top receivers around the country and the schools they were playing. And Sean, I would think that you would want to. He's another one who's here because of his speed, even though he's got more size than Goodwin, and Bird. It was, again, that sub 4.4 on a good day, sub 4.3 speed that everybody focused on in a bigger guy. But I guess they're taking a look at him on the practice squad in the practice field, and he's obviously not doing enough to force his way on the field on Sunday, Sean.
Well, yeah, he's on the active roster. He's not on the practice squad. He's just inactive every week. And you do scratch your head over it a little bit. I wonder how much of it maybe has to do with just coming in and learning a new offense. He came in so late in the training camp or right, but what was it, week 1 practically he was signed. And I don't know that he's ever, just looking through his history, I don't know that he's ever been in an offense that's quite similar to what Matt Nagy wants to run. Now, I know that they've kind of changed things up a little. You would think that he, at this point, should be able to get on the field. I don't really know what's going on with that. I don't know why he hasn't been active yet.
I wouldn't be surprised if he is active this week. I mean, Damiere Byrd has given you virtually nothing, and then you couple it with that drop last week. You might as well give someone else a chance at this point, right?
Well, it certainly makes sense. And CJ, we're going to move on to some more questions here to try and get everybody in. But just to your point, you've raised an interesting question about the Bears that puzzles me, and I don't think there's an answer to it. They're obviously not shy about playing kids. I mean, Jalen Johnson is a rookie starter. Your quarterback, Justin Fields, is a rookie starter. Kendall Vildor was committed too early. Cole Kmet. They'll play youngsters. But then you get these other guys like Jesper Horsted and Ryan Nall and now Brashad Perriman, who are taking roster spots, but they won't play him. I guess Ryan Nall, he is an exceptional special teamer, and I understand that's how he claims the 51st or 52nd or 53rd spot. But you get in a situation like you were in last week where you're down to your 3rd running back, and actually Bill Lazor, I don't think he took offense. We had a little back and forth in the media room on Thursday when I pointed out to him, I said, a lot of people believe you've talked about your new identity, that one of the reasons you had those 2 nice wins before the Packers was the 1-2 punch of first Montgomery and Damian Williams, and then Damian Williams and Khalil Herbert, and then you lose the second part of the punch. Where else do you go for effectiveness out of your offense? And he kind of immediately took exception. He said, I thought Khalil Herbert did a really good job. I said, whoa, Khalil Herbert did a great job. That wasn't the question. The second part, the 1-2 punch. Ryan Nall, why wouldn't they give Ryan Nall or Artavis Pierce, you brought him up for the day, 4, 5, 6 touches, because just look the week before. You've got Williams with 16 rushes, 19 touches. You got Herbert with 18 rushes, 19 touches. And so you lost half of that. There's something about some of these young people on the roster that I don't know why they don't play them if they're going to be on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, if they don't feel like they have a second punch, everything with, Ryan Nall's been on this team for a number of years now, and they just really don't seem like they're interested in giving him a real chance at running back.
I'm gonna derail this for a second because I have a question. Because I saw Adam Schefter tweet last night about Damian Williams probably not being cleared at the earliest until Saturday because he's unvaccinated. Considering now he's probably gonna miss his second game, because he's unvaccinated. And considering the guy, I find it odd that he opted out last year because of COVID concerns. I believe his mother had cancer, right? Had been diagnosed with cancer, so that's why. Which makes it even stranger to me that he hasn't been vaccinated. If David Montgomery was healthy right now, do you think he would have been Damian Williams would have been showing the door for this?
No. I think you got to be very careful there, Kyle. we're we're on tender ground here.
I know, but it just we've heard about teams trying to get guys vaccinated, and then here you have a guy not vaccinated now about to miss his second game. You have Khalil Herbert who stepped up. Just makes me wonder.
I'm not at all shy about it, and I'm not speaking for the company, for Shaw or anybody else. I'm speaking strictly for myself. I could live to be 150. I'll never understand why anybody isn't vaccinated, except for people who have medical exceptions where their doctors are telling them don't because of some, pre-existing condition. I don't get it. And yet I'm not going to, start an argument here or get difficult about it because apparently, what is it? Roughly 27 to 30% of the country doesn't agree with me, and so we're going to have to agree to disagree. It's unfortunate that is putting other people's health and safety at risk, but it's where we're at, and so if that is the reality, the NFL is trying to walk dangerous ground here. The NFL, I think, is probably being as tough on this as any employer in the country with the things they're doing to try and force everybody to be vaccinated. But you go ahead and cut a guy with $1 million contract because he wouldn't do something that he apparently isn't legally obligated to do. I don't think they would go there, and now they could claim that's not the reason, but how could they claim that if he was the starting running back up until the day he got sick?
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. You really can't with David Montgomery out, but I do wonder if that would have been the case with the way the NFL teams are operating.
Right. But what I'm saying is even with David Montgomery back, I don't think you can do that. If they want, hey, it'd be really easy. They could go the last step. They've made it much more difficult on unvaccinated players and vaccinated players to work, to do their jobs, to train, to do everything. They can demand vaccines. They can simply say, get vaccinated or you're out. But they've stopped there for exactly the reason that I just said, because whatever the percentage is, 30% of the country would go nuts, and then the focus would be in the wrong place. This is the puzzled times we live in that have nothing to do with football, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Sorry. I'll get us back on track here. We got a question about the running backs anyway, but kind of in the Tampa Bay. What's a rushing attempt versus Tampa Bay first 5 or 6 games? Are teams trying to run on them all game? I'm hearing the Tampa Bay pass defense is bad.
Yeah, and by the way, just Kyle, I think in part did that for me because he knows how much I love the chance every once in a while to give some of my own personal philosophies and theories, even though I know nobody cares.
No. I've been thinking about that since last night. I wanted to bounce it off someone. Yeah. Wasn't trying to set you up there.
Well, and let's just add one more piece. I'm sure there's been guys who've been cut in large part because they're not vaccinated, but they're bottom of the roster guys.
Cam Newton was pretty much cut because he wouldn't get vaccinated.
That's not true. I know, and I know why you say that, and a lot of people believe that. But that Cam Newton, we could do a whole. You know what? Yeah. When we get to the offseason, let's do one whole podcast on Cam Newton. We could do a series of 3 or 4, as a matter of fact.
It's not the only reason Cam Newton was cut, but I'm sure that made it a little bit easier.
Well, obviously, it was a COVID related issue that was kind of the flashpoint. So, yeah. I'm sorry. Can we just put that question up one more time because I took us off subject? Yeah, Matt, as Kyle already told you, rushing attempts versus Tampa Bay first 5 or 6 games. Our team's trying to run on them all game. Matt, you've seized on part of it. Okay. Generally, when a team, look at the Bears, for instance, and one of the reasons their defense is so good is that the pass defense right now, well, actually they've evened out, but for a while, the pass defense was ahead of the run defense. Then the run defense got really strong. Then they had that awful game against the Packers. But when you see these teams that are first, second, or third in one category and 29th, 30th, or 32nd in the other category, it's always because teams are attacking the weakness. And so one of the reasons that the Bucs are first in the league against the run is because until a week or two ago, they were dead last against the pass, and they're still somewhere around, 29, 30, something like that. So it's a part of it. But then when you look at who the Bucs are and you look at that front seven, they're really good against the run. So they're not impossible to run on, Sean, but it is going to be very difficult for them to run on the Bucs, and that's why it's going to be so interesting to see what the game plan is for Justin Fields Sunday.
Yeah, it's almost always a combination of things that lead to these stats like what the Bucs are putting up against the run. And I saw this question in the queue, and I actually looked it up here just a minute ago. Their first 6 games: Dallas 18 carries, Falcons 20, Rams 24. New England only ran the ball 8 times against them, and Miami tried to do it 27 times, and Philadelphia 19. So teams are trying, or some of them at least. They're just really good up front. I mean, they're doing the things that they need to do to stop teams from running the ball. And then, when you got Tom Brady on the other side, you're going to take a lead, and that's going to change the game plan. And that's probably what's going to happen here with the Bears and with Justin Fields. And we kind of saw it a little bit in Green Bay. That was not in Green Bay, but against Green Bay. That was our first chance to see this Bears offense playing from behind, or at least this version of the Bears offense since week 3 in Cleveland. I think we're going to see that again, and we'll have to see, what adjustments they've made if they've improved in that area.
I mean, it's a combination. The Tampa Bay front 7 is legitimately very, very good. And as Sean pointed out, the Tampa offense has been really efficient early in games. They've jumped out to a lot of leads. And of course, when, you're able to score 3 touchdowns in the first half, you put teams behind the 8 ball. Yeah, the rush attempts are going to be down because, teams are going to have to throw 35, 40 times against you.
Kyle, I apologize. I didn't realize we've been going for so long. We're going to have to sign off pretty soon. Let's see if we can get at least a couple more questions in. Our friends are good enough to join us and ask them. So let's see if we can answer them.
Let's see, guys.
While we're doing that, I would add to Sean's point, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, but I think even detailing that, you only had 2 teams with more than 21 rushing attempts, and that's not enough.
Yeah.
When the Bears won the 2 in a row before last Sunday, they rushed 35 to 40 times. So for their identity, they're going to have to stick with it, longer than other teams have, regardless of what game plan they give Justin Fields.
Yeah, the Falcons were right at 20 attempts. Rams and Dolphins 24, 27. All those other teams were lower. New England hardly ran the ball, and it's interesting because that was a close game. It wasn't like they fell behind by 2 touchdowns.
Well, that's why other teams aren't running it more. If Bill Belichick does it, it must be right. And I say that in respect, not facetiously, by the way.
So this isn't really a question, but it does bring up a good point here. How about I'll let you read it?
Marty is checking in. We talk about Matt Nagy not making adjustments. The proof is the only thing he plans well is the scripted plays. After that, it's downhill. Yes and no, Marty. I know one of the things that the Bears were thrilled about was the fourth quarter drive that they got out of Justin Fields to make it a 1-score game, only in the respect that wasn't scripted plays. However, adjustments are a funny thing. Some teams are better at it than others. Some teams, the flow of the game, you're not really sure where adjustments are and are not being made. I know for a fact that Packer staff did a great job adjusting in game last week at the end of the first quarter. Whether the Bears failed in their adjustments or just couldn't execute them, I really don't know.
See, yeah, that's why I wanted to pull that question up, because I thought the Packers did a really good job of adjusting to what the Bears were doing Sunday. The Bears had a good game plan coming into that. It was effective. And yeah, the question is, did they not make the adjustments, or were the adjustments just not effective?
Yeah, and Sean, what you got to remember is that the Packer horses who really stood out with those adjustments were Aaron Rodgers, Davante Adams, Aaron Jones, Kenny Clark, their best players, okay? But you can't really get away with adjustments only for your best players. So I think it's a weakness of this Bears staff, but it's another one of those that would be tough to prove.
It was interesting listening to, or I guess I might have gone back, looked at the transcript rather than listened to it, but Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers talking about that, that big gain in the fourth quarter where he stepped out of bounds along the right sideline. And they talked about how that was a play where they had seen something in the first half and they made an adjustment. And, Adams wasn't, the play wasn't designed for him to run that route, but I think whether it was Jalen Johnson, I think he was passing him off or something, and he kind of slipped between 2 guys, and they had a big play. And don't really see, Aaron Rodgers is so good at that, and that's one of his biggest strengths, and that's why.
No, go ahead.
Oh, that's why he is who he is, and that's he's really good at that, and we don't necessarily see that from every quarterback out there.
And one of the points that I made in my day after column, guys, is that the Packers had 57 offensive plays. They got 35% of their offense on 4 plays, on the 40-plus yard catch for Adams, on a 28 and a 31-yard run from A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones, respectively, and then on the Rodgers 16-yard scramble. You take those 4, and it's not the way the game works. I'm not making an argument the Bears, deserve to win. They didn't deserve to win, but you take those 4 plays away. That's how close the Bears are. And that's some of the things that make the Packers always look better, is that they found those 4 plays and those plays changed the game.
Sean Desai said that on Thursday, somebody asked him about Jalen Johnson being on Adams so frequently in that game. And yeah, he basically said, you can play great for 55 plays, but if the 56th one is a big play, suddenly it looks like you didn't have a good game.
Have we got one more question before we have to say goodbye, Kyle?
Yeah, we'll wrap it up here. Going back to Justin Fields, but we'll pop this up.
Philip Johnson, thanks for joining us, Phil. We've got a lot of folks who are regulars, but I had not noticed Phil in the question queue in the past. And folks, if you're listening to this podcast and wondering what we're talking about, we've pretty much locked in our 9:30 Chicago time Friday morning podcast production, and we do it live on StreamYard. So you can go to any of our Twitter accounts or go to YouTube, and you can join the podcast live. You can get your questions in. You can react. We got to do a little bit better job, I think, of getting to some of our questions earlier to get as many people in as we can. But that's mainly my fault. I've got to get over my love affair with the sound of my own voice. So Phil is asking, it'd be nice to see more downfield throws and more RPOs with Fields. Felt last week they didn't do enough. Phil, it'd be nice to see a lot of things, but you got to take what's there, and just forcing the ball downfield doesn't do you any good. And when you're running these 2- and 3-man routes, it's that much harder to get a chunk play downfield. As far as more RPOs, Phil, you may be a very sophisticated fan, but for most folks, it's hard to know what is and what isn't an RPO. They are running, some of them. Are they running enough? Is that part of where Fields is at in his development? I don't really know, but I think, fans sometimes, guys, take RPOs as a way for Fields to have more designed running plays, and an RPO is not a designed running play. So it may be that what they need is more 4- or 5-man routes where they can have the better chance of something opening up for a chunk play, and they may need more designed runs for Fields as opposed to RPOs. These are maybes I'm throwing out there, Kyle.
I agree. I think they need more 4- and 5-man routes, and they need more RPOs. If you put in more RPOs, all that does is that gives Justin Fields another decision point. You're just probably going to slow down his decision making more, which is what you don't want at this point.
Yeah, but here's the other problem, Sean, that they've got to consider is that with 4- or 5-man routes, it's a lot harder to be effective with the RPOs, because you got to block them up right if you want them to work.
Yeah, and then you're not, then you're trusting your 5 offensive linemen. You're not using your extra, your tight ends or Alex Bars as your 6th lineman in those situations.
Well, guys, we have gone close to the time limit again, and I know Sean and I have to hit the road and get out to Hallis Hall, but we do appreciate everybody joining us. I think before we go goodbye, say goodbye, we normally at least give a thought as to what we might expect to see on Sunday, even though our predictions and I have a game preview and Sean has 5 things to watch for at shawlocal.com. So Sean, why don't you kick us off? How do you think this thing plays out Sunday?
I think this thing plays out. The Bucs are going to get an early lead. It's hard to stop Tom Brady with what he's doing right now. I think the Bears will be playing from behind. I think they're going to keep this a game for a while. In my picks that I sent to Kyle yesterday, I had the Bucs 27-13, which is right about that 14-point margin. I think they'll add a touchdown in the 4th quarter to make it wider, and right about that two touchdown lead.
Kyle, what do you got?
I think the Bears and Justin Fields have a little more success in the passing game, just because just because they're probably going to have to attempt a lot more passes. I think you're going to see a career high in the pass attempt from Justin Fields this week. I think that Tampa Bay wins this game 27-20. I think that's a pretty fair assessment for where the Bears are right now.
Yeah, guys, I mean, I certainly can't be the outlier to predict an upset here. There's just nothing to base it on. I think the other thing that troubles me a little bit is that while Tom Brady in many respects is the opposite of Aaron Rodgers, he certainly hasn't forgotten his national TV embarrassment and loss last year at Soldier Field. It wasn't to me, it wasn't an embarrassment. He held up four fingers. It did appear he wasn't sure, what down it was, but that's not why they lost the football game.
I completely forgot about that until
well, he didn't. That's my point. Is I will guarantee you Tom Brady did not. And so I do think you're going to get the best of Tom Brady, and he has an arsenal of weapons that Bears fans can only drool about. So even if the defense is healthier, which it has not been so far as we record this week in practice, it's just you can play great defense and you still need to score 25 to 30 points, to beat this team. And if the Bucs can take away the ground game or just even limit it a lot more, and now you're putting the game on Justin Fields' arm, there's nothing we've seen to suggest he's ready for that. So the numbers are always tough, and I know people play the over/under, and you want to hear the score. I never know what to expect, because the Bears defense has played really well a few times and given up 20 points. The offense has played better than we expected and still only scored 14 or 17. So I think I had this about a 12 or 13 point game, and I know the line has moved. I think it's at 12.5. I think it's a tough line. I would stay away from it. And I think the defense is good enough that they'll probably hold the Bucs to, 26, 27 points, but I can't find a way to see the Bears putting more than 13, 15, 16 points on the board. So I've got it a 12-point game, pretty much in the same range as you guys. We want to thank everybody for joining us. We want to thank all of you who participated with us. Again, make sure you go to the App Store on your phone or iTunes or shawlocal.com. You can download a subscription to our podcast, so it's there waiting for you every week. And you can join us live. If we change it, we'll let you know. Watch our Twitter accounts, but at 9:30 every Friday morning is when we try and sit down and do this. That's 9:30 Chicago time. And if you are with us, you can see our Twitter handles. It's at Kyle Nabors. It's at Sean_Hammond. It's at Hub _Arkush. And again, we appreciate you all being with us. We hope the Bears will be better to you this week. If you're Bears fans, we know that not all of you are Bears fans. If you're Bucs fans, we can't give you good wishes, but we hope for a great football game. And if you're Packers fans, we are both jealous and you make us crazy. So have a great week, everybody, and we will talk to you again next Friday.